in a couple of weeks. But you are listening right now to Execution Watch. We are here for Brent Brewer, who has already, the witnesses have already gone ahead and crossed the road, as we like to say, and we are waiting to hear back from Linda Snyder in, Linda, any news for us?
Yes, they have not come back yet.
All right. Did you know Brent?
Yes, he was a very nice guy, and he was, 30 years he was incarcerated with not even one bad mark against his name.
Wow.
No disciplinary cases or anything. So this is just wrong.
30 years.
I used to not be able to go 30 days.
Right.
So, 30 years, dang.
So have we completely lost the concept of forgiveness in our system? Is our judicial system so hell-bent on just getting these convictions that we don't pay attention to the fact that we are killing a person who is no longer the same person he was 30 years ago?
Right.
I don't. You often wonder about, because sometimes they seem bloodthirsty, and they say it goes back to, they say, well, the sacredness of the jury's decision,
right,
and us not second guessing the jury,
Yeah.
And so, but then they turn around and ignore the jury when they say, hey, I was confused, or I didn't want to do that, or that's not what I said, and so, I can't sit there and get into their mind.
Well, no,
but to me,
especially if
sometimes it seems like they like killing.
Yeah.
I'm like, dang, y'all call us the sociopaths.
I was listening today to the web seminar that was going on with the Innocence Project, and one of the things that they were talking about specifically is how people, the general public's view of what's going on in prisons and in the death penalty cases is so tainted by what they see on television and in the media. And, they watch forensic shows and they believe that everybody, that they're going to get these detailed analyses within a day of what's going on because they see this evidence on television. And it is so untrue of what's actually representative in our judicial system. How do we change that?
Well, that's true for the entire judicial system, whether it's the death penalty or just the smash and grab. When you watch TV, that's entertainment. And people have to understand that that's all it is. And so you can't judge the entire legal system based on what you see on TV. But that goes with almost any profession, the medical system or anything that's there, because everything is just solely for entertainment. The thing that gets me most about this case, though, is the reality, the reality of the position that Brent Brewer found himself in. That is, he's trying to maintain his life, but he's got to turn that over to lawyers, okay? And you've got these experts who come forward and testify one way against him. And so the court says, well, your lawyers could have done a better job of refuting that testimony. He says, okay, well, my lawyers gave me ineffective assistance of counsel. And you say, well, and there's nothing you can do about that. Well, we don't find it to be ineffective. It just could have been better. That's the flavor I get from reading some of the underlying information, that he's in that position and there's nothing he can do because he's got to depend on his lawyers, and whether the lawyer's doing a great job or a terrible job, he has no way of knowing sometimes. Sometimes they know. But if the court is going to be critical of the lawyer's representation to some degree in terms of keeping out evidence, then should the defendant have the benefit of complaining about the lawyer, saying, well, the lawyer didn't do a good job? Well, that's just tough.
And they did try. I mean, they tried to, via a pretrial hearing, try to get that testimony out.
Yes.
They came up with their own expert who testified on future dangerousness, and that expert said he's not going to be future danger. So the
Yes.
jury heard that too, and plus mitigating evidence. So that's why plus the fact that his testimony, Kuhn's testimony, was not discredited yet by the CCA because that came a year later. So the court said, well, your lawyers are not ineffective because they could not have known that at the time. And that's the unfairness.
That's the very point that got me. How are the lawyers going to know?
But see, to comment 2 points that Larry said, real quick, because you asked the question about the experts, why they go to them, because they're tried and true. No prosecutor wants to go with an expert that might not be able to stand up to the vigorous cross-examination by a defense attorney, so they go with the tried and true. Like, hey, who you got? Oh man, he's went good against every lawyer we put against, the defense puts against them, right? And so that's why they generally use the same experts, because they're tried and true. On this issue, there's actually a case law where a guy raised an issue about the prosecutor or police and things that were done in his trial in that regard, and they denied him, saying his lawyer should have objected. It's understood that case law evolves. They say so any lawyer should know that it doesn't matter if the case law is in your favor now, you still object to preserve the record. And so the lawyer made a strategic decision not to object. Therefore, Strickland doesn't apply. But then in this situation, they're saying, well, there's no way the lawyer could have been a fortune teller and seen that this law would have changed or this expert would have been banned. And so therefore, the lawyer is not ineffective. And that's the problem with the CCA. It goes back to what we were saying earlier, is that I can find you a case law that says one way this, and then 5 years later, or sometimes 5 months later, there's another case law that contradicts. And so it's just like the McCoy claims. And they say a defendant, if he doesn't stand up and like scream out, in the Barbie case, he just said, hey, I'm innocent. Well, he didn't explicitly say that that's not the defense that his lawyer didn't want to put on. Yeah. Well, what part of innocent doesn't mean I don't want this dude to say I'm guilty? I mean, but they tell you in court, if you yell out, we're going to gag you or hit you with a stun gun. And so people are afraid to yell out, and nobody wants to look disruptive in court. And so, but then the CCA doesn't let you speak out on yourself, of course. And they say, well, if the defendant didn't speak up, then tough luck. You get executed.
And if you do speak out.
Yeah, and if you do speak out, then, well, he was disruptive in court, right. So the jury was right in finding him a future danger. And so it's kind of like...
It's a rigged system.
Yeah, it's just...
Well, the other thing is, we're talking about witnesses, whether we're talking about expert witnesses or lay witnesses.
Right.
There are just some people who are just flat out persuasive. They sit there and they talk, and people just believe them. And sometimes they're just lying, okay, or just not telling, just shading the truth. And there are just some people who are just flat believable, and others who know the information and say almost the same thing, and people just don't believe them. So if you've got a persuasive witness, that carries a lot of weight. A whole lot of weight, and the parent of Coons must be pretty persuasive also.
Except for this juror.
Except for this.
You get somebody up there and they say they have all these degrees and all this other stuff, and so jurors start to go for it. Like there was a forensic pathologist out of Mississippi that did an astronomical amount of autopsies in a year. That the autopsy people say, the board said that this wouldn't be
talked about.
It wouldn't be possible to do this many autopsies. It's not humanly possible. And in one case out of Louisiana, they even brought the dude down to Louisiana. He said that he could tell that this 12-year-old little black kid that was on trial for murder, he got on the stand and told the jury that he could tell by the bullet wound that his sister, because the question was asked, well, how's this little boy gonna hold this big pistol? And he said he could tell by the bullet wound that his sister was reaching around him, holding his hands as he held this big old .357 Magnum and shot somebody by the bullet. And then the youngster's case was denied because they say, well, the jury could weigh the evidence. But you got 12 uneducated people who don't know nothing about the law. They don't know nothing about forensic pathology besides watching a CSI episode.
Right.
And so they're supposed to make the informed decision based on a bunch of
Well, there's a lot to be said
BS.
about gang mentality. When you get into a room, when you are locked into a room, and somebody says you have power, there is something about a gang mentality that is persuasive.
Yeah, I mean, the
It's
mob.
not right, but it's persuasive.
Yeah, you have somebody that sits in there, and like, if you have a jury foreman, for
Yeah.
example, well, in America, we're generally raised that respect authority, defer to the person that's picked to be our voice. And so the jury basically votes and says, hey, that's going to be we're going to agree to you to be a jury foreman. And he kind of leads the charge. And it's more likely not the person that's more leaning towards would be convicting somebody that wants to take that role.
Right.
And so a lot of jurors, they get pressured in. I mean, there's been time and time again where they say, look, I was pressured in. I mean, not everybody can stand up to a forceful personality, and
that's some of the things that we've been talking about. The juror, I
Right.
think her name is Michelle Douglas.
Yes.
And
No relation.
No relation. Okay. but it can be persuasive to be there with the group.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out what should I do, and that's why it's so important to make sure the jurors can stand on their own. But some people just can't do it or don't do it. And she decided that, well, rather than voting my conscience, apparently what she's saying, rather than voting my conscience, it doesn't make any difference.
Right.
And so had I known it made a difference, that is, had I been properly instructed, then I would have voted differently. That's critical.
Absolutely.
That's critical.
She says in this, and I'm just going to read it directly if you all don't mind, believing incorrectly that my vote was meaningless, I acquiesced in the majority's death penalty verdict.
That's powerful.
That is and now a man is losing his life, even though there was one person who could have changed that. This is
it's either sacred or it's not. That's what the folks got to decide, right? It's like, is this your sacred system? And if you do, sometimes you win some, sometimes you lose some. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that you do the right thing.
Right. We're not just flipping a coin.
Right.
That's why I thought it would be powerful for clemency, but nobody on the Texas Board of Partisan Paroles actually voted in favor. It was unanimously rejected, even with this letter, and they sent that in. Not to say that she didn't make a difference. If she's listening tonight, I think she definitely did make a difference because of all the people that read this.
Yeah, she did.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's very,
Absolutely.
very powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there might be a
Very
future
powerful.
juror that reads that.
Yeah.
And then that person, when they get on a jury, is like, no, I'm not giving in.
Well, education. That's part
Yeah.
of the reason why we have this show, is that people need to know that they are part of this process as well. We're not telling you how to make a decision. We're not telling you who to vote for. But we are telling you to pay attention because we all have rights. Linda, thank you for being with us for so long. And I know that you visit these people often. You are what we long called a death row angel. And
Yes.
can you, I don't want you to be, tell us conversations or anything, but can you tell us how they feel when they realize that such a miscarriage of justice is going on?
Well, it hurt. Another thing I want to tell you is the family just came back across. I think the sister was the witness, and then 2 news people, and they just came back from out of the building.
Was Michael there? Okay. Thank you. Thank you so
And
much.
yes, I do see I see the guys, and I know the first time I went to visit, I thought I was going to see monsters. They're not monsters. They're human beings.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And let's just say, so ends the life of Mr. Brent Brewer. Rest in peace, Brent Ray Brewer.
Yeah.
May your passing help the healing of those who demanded it and the state who endorsed it. Clint.
Oh, yeah, real quick, like, Brent never got in trouble down there. He was a quiet dude, right, man? So he wasn't a threat to nobody. The state gains nothing by executing him. I mean, it's been 30, 40 years. But something else I wanted to point out is that I don't think this was covered, was the reason why there's not an interview for Brent Brewer is because TDC blocked him because the victim's family said they didn't want to hear the interview. And so that's why they wasn't able to record it, because, and first of all, Texas Constitution allows the free speech laws within Texas Constitution is greater than the United States Constitution, the federal Constitution. And so I would say that in Texas, we actually have a better access towards free speech, media, and etc. But because the victim's family said that they didn't want him to do something, okay, well, victims' families have said they didn't want a man to be killed in their name, but they still killed the man. And so now, because the victim family said that, oh, well, I don't think he should be able to speak. It's not to take nothing away from the victim's family, and I understand they have their pain and their suffering, right? And I'm not trying to negate that in any shape, form, or fashion. But a man never loses his right to be heard. Like, that's something I believe wholeheartedly. And for TDC to do that, I mean, it's blatantly illegal. Code of Criminal Procedure at the very beginning, it talks about free speech. And so they were, because if what's his name with Associated Press goes in there, they're going to let him go in there.
Michael Krzyzewski.
Right, because they know what kind of article he's going to write. And so, but they won't let Execution Watch go in there. It's just like, that's a new one. I've never seen TDC, do that before.
Neither had I, but they do have new people.
Yeah, well,
We know that there is, of course, a new warden. We know that there is a new public information officer. We are learning as quickly as we can how to get around with everyone. We are not unprofessional people. We are very professional people, and would like them to be professional as well.
Look, they just need to follow the law. They expect me to follow the law. They expect me to follow the rules. They need to follow the law. They need to follow the rules.
Yes, that's true. We're coming now to the end. Do you have anything else you'd like to say, Larry?
No, I mean, I just want to wish that the family is able to recover from this. I wish them all the best. Their loved one was murdered years ago. I wish comfort for them, and I also wish comfort for the family of Brent Brewer. This is two people have died as a result of this whole matter, and any death is a tragedy as far as I'm concerned.
Really is.
Yep.
Well, if you're saying prayers, say a little prayer for Christy Lynn Nystrom, because she's not going to be having a very good day today either, for sure. Meryl?
Well, I think since Brent was not allowed to speak, and Clint did spend almost 20 years with him on death row, maybe we could just end with some words about Brent coming from him.
Yeah, I mean, whatever they say he was at the time of his trial is not the man he is today, right?
That's right.
Mean, he developed friends while he was down there. I mean, he wrote to people around the world. He made the conscious decision to not be violent and disruptive. And that shows a personal growth. It shows, remorse. It shows, changing who you are to become a better person, right? And
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we will continue this, of course. Thanks to everyone. That brings to a close this edition of Execution Watch for Thursday, November 9th, 2023. Our next scheduled broadcast date is Thursday, November 16th, as Texas prepares to send David Renteria into the death chamber in Huntsville, Texas. We welcome your opinions. Please check our pages. A very special thanks to our crew, to Larry Douglas, to Pat McCann, to Merle Pontier. I'll have to get used to it. Linda Snyder and Clinton Young, video director Mark Pirtle, Otis McClay, Howard Reynolds, Sarah Sheridan, Elise Binch, and to our producer, executive producer Elizabeth Ann Stein. Just a reminder, please support Execution Watch. If you're listening live right now on KPFT 90.1 FM. Stay tuned for People of Earth with Jacqueline Baptiste. This has been Execution Watch. I'm Marlo Blue. Thank you very much. Good night.
I keep y'all's head up on the road.
Yay.
State of Texas, leave Willie alone. The government killed the most. Got a problem, death row. Ever wonder where money goes? People of Texas, don't you know? Some accused are innocent. Some get good lawyers, most don't. State of Texas, killing machine. Don't you know they're killing people? 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 They're not giving up. One's too many. Will 1,000 be enough? One life. We're not giving up. One's too many in 1,000.
David Renteria is a prisoner in Texas. If the state has its way, he'll be dead within the hour. This is Execution Watch. Huntsville, Texas, death penalty capital of the Western world, where prison staff is preparing to put Renteria to death by injecting him with a deliberate drug overdose. During the next hour, KPFT's Execution Watch will air live coverage of the killing in Texas, the state that carries out a third of U.S. executions. Execution Watch host Marlo Blue, criminal defense attorneys Larry Douglas and Pat McCann, Huntsville reporter outside the death house Linda Schneider, general reporter Clint Young, and special interview guest Robin Marr, executive director of the Death Penalty Information Center on Criminal Justice. The Execution Watch for David Renteria begins.
One's too many. Will 1,000 be enough?
Good evening. This is Execution Watch with news coverage and analysis of the execution of David Renteria in Huntsville, Texas, the busiest death chamber in the Western world. To our listeners around the world, thank you for joining us on this Thursday, November the 16th, 2023 edition of Execution Watch. I'm Marlo Blue, and if you're tuning in for Progressive Forum on KPFT Houston, they will be back next week in their regular Thursday, 6 o'clock time slot. Execution Watch is brought to you in part by the Clinton Young Foundation and is produced by a dedicated staff of volunteers. Go to kpft.org and pledge your support to us now as we report live each and every night an execution is scheduled in the state of Texas. The live stream of this show can be found on our Facebook page as well, and we thank Houston MediaSource, as always, for simulcasting During tonight's broadcast, we will be giving you details about the case, including background surrounding the trial and conviction. We have expert legal analysis as well to give live reports from Huntsville and breaking news regarding any last-minute judicial action. And we will hear from our newest reporter, who himself is a former death row inmate. Tonight, the state of Texas will execute 53-year-old David Renteria. We're speaking with Execution Watch reporter Linda Snyder, who is outside of the death chamber in Huntsville, Texas, where David Renteria is being put to death by non-medical personnel, injecting them with a deliberate overdose of pentobarbital. But before we go to Linda, just remember sometimes there's a lot of noise. I'm sorry, there's not much that we can do about this. This is a live broadcast. And while we do our best to keep the background audio clean, it can get very loud and sometimes a bit difficult for our reporters to be able to hear us. Hello, Linda. Thank you for joining us. What's the atmosphere like tonight?
Hi, it's very quiet tonight. There's not a lot of people here. His family is here, but they're not out here with us. I think they're still back at the hospitality house.
Will they be standing witness?
They're not going to witness. No, the only witness he has is going to be his spiritual advisor, which is, her name is Dorothy, and she's with him in the chamber.
For years, we have been telling people on Execution Watch that our signal that the execution was about to begin was the witnesses crossing the road. We know that all witnesses are now escorted into their separate viewing rooms only after the IV needles have been inserted into the prisoner's arms to make sure that any of that part of the procedure that could go wrong doesn't do so as being witnessed by the public. But still, the witnesses entering and leaving the death house has been our indication for years that the execution has begun and when it was over. Can you explain how that's changed and why?
It's changed because they had a fire here that damaged the area where they go into. And so now they come out, and instead of crossing the road, they just get into vans, and the vans take them around to the back of the building where they enter and go in to witness.
Linda, tell us about David Renteria.
As far as I know, he's a very nice person. He's changed. I mean, when he came in prison, of course, he did a horrible crime. But, he's human. And over the years, he has changed. And I just don't believe in the death penalty. I think that, his life could be spared and he could help the young people maybe not make the same mistakes that he made. And but they're not going to probably give him that chance tonight. It doesn't look good for him.
Well, there is a separate appeal, I believe, that's been filed, but nothing has been heard about that. Have you heard anything? Right.
We haven't.
Well, Linda, let us know when you see any activity that's going on, will you?
I will let you know.
Thank you. And before we go to Larry Douglas and find out a little bit more about this case, I'd like to bring in Clinton Young. Clinton, you knew David. You know David. Tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, I knew David. He got there shortly after myself.
When was that? What year was that?
I got in 2003. So he got there like late 2003, early 2004. Ended up moving on to Pablo at the same time. I mean, we weren't friends. Prison being as it is and the nature of the offense. But as far as death penalty being reserved for the worst of the worst, I mean, the reality is this right here. Prison, because how prison is and the nature of his case, just honestly speaking, the prison environment would have been more of a threat to him than him to that environment. And, a lot of times when you have cases like this, which I'm not saying he's guilty or not, but a lot of times you have cases like this, it's based on revenge, you know, because it's the reality. There's no kids in prison. You know, you're stuck in prison with a bunch of grown men that got kids, and so it's not. I mean, generally speaking, I'm against the death penalty, naturally, but he's not what you consider as somebody that's dangerous to the prison population, you know. And so a lot of it, like I said, a lot of time in these cases like this, it comes down to revenge. He didn't ever get in trouble there. You know, he didn't have no disciplinary record. I think he had like one disciplinary case, and it was for something that he honestly didn't do. He moved into a cell, and there was something stuck underneath the bottom of the door, and he shook him down the next day. And I mean, I personally know it was not his contraband. But he ended up getting a case for it because he was in a cell. So he didn't get in trouble. I mean, he was real religious. He was always involved in all the religious programs that they offer there. And, you know, like I said, it's not going to change anything by executing him. I mean, it just comes down to revenge. And as a society, you know, we're supposed to be, especially the government, the system is supposed to be beyond revenge. No, it's not supposed to be about revenge. It's supposed to be that this individual poses a continuing threat to others in society. And when you go through a death penalty trial, they tell the jury that society could be the prison population. Society doesn't necessarily have to mean out in the free world.
Right. Clinton, I want to bring up something that you mentioned very quickly is that there are no children in prison. You were very, very young when you first hit prison. Tell me about the growing up situation. How did that change in your life? What happened?
I mean, prison's a hyper masculine environment. I was in TYC, and then I got out shortly, and I went to TDC, which the youth centers are actually more violent than the adult. There's more murders in the adult system, but there's more violence per capita in the juvenile system, especially the facility I was at. But and so, I mean, prison's just like I said, it's a hyper masculine environment. It's not a nice place to be. I mean, it's a strong survival type situation, right?
How did you deal with it? How did you personally cope with it? What was your coping mechanism?
Well, my person, when in Rome, do Rome. I mean, me personally, I became a product of my environment. You know, so in violent in prison, unfortunately, violence is a form of communication, and that's what hurt me in my case is because my incarceration disciplinary records, and that's what's hurting me now with my retrial. But it's because you're thrown in these environments, and you know you have to do what you got to do to survive, and so that's why I say that, like, you know, it's a harsh reality. Is
Right.
that David? I mean, they're executing David, not possibly, hopefully not. But I mean, the society that he was going to live in, I mean, he just wasn't going to be a threat. I mean, that's just, like I said, that's just the reality, right?
Right.
I mean, I don't wish that on nobody. I blame the government for operating the way that it does because, you know, at the end of the day, it's the government's facility, and they allow it to function in the way that it functions because it benefits them. But, you know, like I said, I mean, I don't know what happened with this situation. Well,
So,
I actually knew the little girl in her case, in this case, uncle, right? And so that's why it's like, you know, it's a unique situation for me because I knew her uncle. But you know, like I just say that, man, it doesn't serve society. You know, financially, it's not going to be a deterrent to the death penalty. It's not going to change anything. Execute him tonight. I mean, it's just all about revenge. That's what it's about,
Right.
right? I mean, you know.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the case, if you don't mind. Larry, tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Okay. David Santiago Renteria is identified as being a Native American. Grew up in El Paso. The mitigation evidence from the trial reflects that he was a high school graduate. Actually, was identified as being, but described as being a good kid. Quiet, friendly, respectful, studious, popular. He was an altar boy growing up. And he was also a member of the National Honor Society. Graduated high school and worked as a laborer. Then when he was, in 1992, when he was 23 years old, he was accused of the offense of indecency with a child. So when he was accused of the offense, and that would have been I think a 9-year-old girl, what he did was he pled guilty to what's called deferred adjudication. So he's pleading guilty. He's got to register as a sex offender. He pled guilty to indecency with a child, and was placed on deferred adjudication. That's the kind of probation whereby you plead guilty. Judge says there's enough evidence here to find you guilty, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put you on probation. If you live up to all the terms and conditions of your probation, at the end of the case, then you have no conviction. But if it's ever alleged you violated any one term of your probation, at that point, you're only entitled to a hearing before the judge. If the judge at that hearing finds you violated your probation, the judge could then find you guilty and could sentence you anywhere within the range of punishment. And in this case, I believe his range of punishment was anywhere from 2 years to 20 years in prison. But again, being a young man, and a lot of young men are just not real good probation candidates. And so he repeatedly violated his probation in terms, I think he picked up 3 DWIs. He was working in a place where he was around children. He should not have been there. So he was in trouble for that, and apparently that was putting a lot of pressure on him, according to what the relatives reflected, that being on probation was just not he did not do very well on probation. This is when he was like 23 years old, a 10-year deferred adjudication, but they never revoked his probation. In fact, he's identified as having a sentence of 20 years. Sentenced to 20 years in prison. Apparently didn't go to prison for that, because when he was arrested for this offense, he was on deferred adjudication. So they probably, my guess would be that they went ahead, had him adjudicated guilty and maxed him out at 20, because he wasn't going anywhere anyway. So a few years later, several years later, it is reported that he abducted Alexandra Flores. This was a young girl who reportedly was in Walmart. This is back on November 18th of 2001. She's the youngest of, I believe, 8 children, and the family is out shopping at Walmart, doing Christmas shopping. She went missing, and the family's frantically looking for her. They don't find her till the next day, 16 miles away. And when she's found, it was determined that she was dead. The medical examiner said that she had been hit in the head a couple of times, strangled, and there was a plastic bag left on her head, and the body was partially burned. Even though there was no evidence of any kind of sexual assault determined from her autopsy, the medical examiner gave the opinion that, well, she could have been sexually assaulted. So he's also on probation, in this case deferred adjudication, for a prior indecency with a child case. So when he was arrested, they found blood consistent with her blood in his van. They found a palm print on the bag that was used to cover her head. And at trial, he was found guilty and sentenced to death in 2003, I believe it was. That case was overturned. That case got overturned because the judge, the appeals court, mentioned that the prosecutor, in trying to get the death penalty on him, the prosecutor argued at punishment that Renteria never showed any remorse. And there was evidence in the file that he's shown remorse. So the appeals court overturned that and gave him a new punishment hearing.
I just want to step in for a second. We follow all sorts of bloggers and people who are involved in this case. And of course, we are waiting to hear if there is any other movement going on. And this is from Stephanie Valle, who is actually one of the media witnesses for tonight's execution. And she says on X, I just spoke to officials with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice who confirm they cannot move forward with the 6 p.m. execution until there is an opinion from SCOTUS. We can't act if there is an appeal pending a ruling. That was approximately 22 minutes ago. And that's been verified by one of the news agencies, an ABC station, KVIA. Let's continue.
That's good news. Who knows what's going to happen now?
Right.
But at least for now, that's good news.
Right.
When David was arrested, after he was arrested, he gave a written statement, claiming that, well, there was a grainy video showing Alexandra leaving the Walmart following a man, and there was the claim was that man was David. So, and again, her blood was in his van. When he gave the written statement, he said that, I did kidnap her, but I didn't kill her. So what happened was I was threatened by a gang called Barrio Azteca, and they convinced me to try to bring her out of the store. So I did that. They killed her. I helped them dispose of the body, but I didn't kill her. That was according to his written statement. Now, in the trial, the prosecutor did not even try to introduce any of that stuff, nor did the defense attorneys try to introduce any of that, apparently. But in any event, the case got overturned on direct appeal because of the prosecutor's argument that that David did not show any remorse when there was plenty of evidence that he did show remorse. So he got a new trial, but he got a new punishment hearing with the same result. And some of the recent arguments that are going on now in terms of trying to save his life is the appellate lawyers are raising the question of the fact that a woman came forward back in 18 or 19, I believe, saying that a friend of hers confirmed the story that David, her boyfriend told her that David didn't kill anybody because she knows the gal did, and he's a member of the gang. Her evidence was considered. The judge says there was just too much conflict in her evidence. Okay, and the appellate lawyers complain that, well, we need to see the state's entire file on that issue of the woman who says her boyfriend did the killing, because this might very well be in a case of actual innocence. If he didn't kill her and somebody else did, then we need to be able to review that matter and find out whether in fact he did or whether somebody else did. But at this point, we can just hold this matter, at least have the opportunity to review the matter of the possibility of someone else other than David having committed this murder. And we need some time to research that issue and to raise it at appeal. So that's kind of where the recent most significant controversies have been. So far, they've been unsuccessful, but who knows what's going to happen now that the Supreme Court has apparently not acted, and the officials are waiting to see what the Supreme Court does.
Well, let's bring in Pat McCann at this point. Pat, you know, Renteria's lawyers have submitted the application to Justice Alito today, just minutes before the scheduled execution. What do we expect now? We're talking to Pat McCann. He
You're muted.
will unmute himself, I am hoping. And again, ABC 7 in El Paso has confirmed with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice that this appeal pertains to the drugs used in the lethal injection. They're saying that an injection of compounded pentobarbital has unnecessarily been left to degrade so that non-lethal degradants, some known to cause pain, can precipitate into the solution. That's according to the appeals.
Yeah, this was not successful in Jedediah Murphy's case a little bit ago, but on occasion, the Supreme Court will take something after a few tries of ignoring it. It is a last minute. Alito is not a favorable justice. Everything else has been shut down. So I'm hopeful that he gets a stay, particularly since, as Clinton pointed out, this guy is not, according to our questions, he's not a future danger to anybody inside a prison. And again, there's a serious question about whether or not the state has actually tried to solve the crime. Even if Mr. Renteria is a party and was forced to commit a kidnapping, that leaves several people out in the wind that apparently the state has no interest in finding because it disrupts their theory.
Right.
And that's unfortunate, but that's not unexpected in Texas.
So Justice Alito has it because, of course, we're in the 5th district. Is that correct?
5th Circuit, yeah. He inherited it from Scalia.
This just in, SCOTUS just called, they denied Renteria. The execution will proceed.
Yeah, unfortunate but expected.
Unfortunate, but expected. So that's it. The drugs are going to be put in. This is going to be the beginning of the end for David. Is this correct?
And Marlo, apparently this case was a pretty well-known case in El Paso. And Clinton mentioned that he knows the young lady who was killed, Alexandra Flores, that he knows her uncle. It's after 22 years, it's still something that's pretty widely known in El Paso. I believe one of her relatives actually works for the district attorney's office there in El Paso, and he mentioned having spoken at the trial and having I guess a victim impact statement or something of that sort, saying that he let Renteria know, I do not forgive you. I will never forgive you. I understand that, God can forgive you, but I never will. He was interviewed recently and says, "I still feel the same way." So the feelings are still strong in El Paso. And Clinton mentioned the issue of vengeance. You can't help but believe that there is some of that there. It's my understanding that one of the prosecutors from the DA's office in El Paso is supposed to be witnessing the execution also. I saw a story that said that. Now, whether that really occurred, I don't know, but there was some indication that a prosecutor was going to be there to accompany some of the family members to witness the execution. So while Renteria, I suspect, will never be a danger to people inside TDC or even outside at this point, I can't help but think that the issue of vengeance is playing a real big part in this man's execution. That's just one guy's opinion.
Gotcha. Let me just remind our listeners that you are listening to KPFT 90.1 FM in Houston, Texas. The Progressive Forum, which is normally heard here on Thursday evenings from 6 to 7, will be back next week. So please stay tuned for that. It is 6:30. Thank you for joining us here in Central Time as we await word of what is happening in Huntsville from our reporter outside of the death chamber. As you can hear, that is the protests outside of the death house. That is Gloria Rubik, and she is hopefully trying to get a last-minute message to David Renteria. Let's move on a little bit more while we wait to hear what else is going on. Our featured interview guest is Robin Marr, Executive Director of the Death Penalty Information Center. She has many years of experience, both practical and scholarly, in the death penalty field. An international speaker, she has worked in the federal defender system. Ms. Marr led the American Bar Association's efforts to develop guidelines for appointing counsel in capital cases. Ms. Marr, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
I'm glad to be with you. Thank you.
I want to specifically talk about the cost, the human cost of the death penalty and its irreversibility are at the center of everything we do on Execution Watch. But we want our audience to have all of the facts when they consider whether they support capital punishment. So let's talk about the cost. Is it more expensive for taxpayers if the state executes a person or if the person is held in prison for the rest of their life?
Yeah, I thank you for the question. This is a surprising fact for a lot of people, but it is much, much more expensive to sentence someone to death and execute him than it is to imprison someone for the rest of their natural life in a maximum security setting. That has borne true in state after state study. I don't think there has ever been a study that shows that there are cost savings associated with the death penalty. So this is an important thing to be thinking about when you think about where you want to invest your resources, whether you want your millions of dollars of taxpayer money to be supporting a death penalty system or to be invested in roads and hospitals and schools and other infrastructure.
Well, what is the magnitude of the cost differences? I mean, estimate the average difference between the cost of execution versus life without parole.
Yeah, the numbers I've seen in Texas it's about 3 times as expensive. So about $1.3 million to $3.8 million. And that is true in every other state. I've seen 2 and 3 and 4 times the cost to sentence someone to death and to eventually execute him. And there are many reasons for that. Capital cases are much more expensive than non-capital cases. The trials are much more complicated. There are 2 phases for a capital case. The lawyers, you need 2 qualified lawyers on a defense team. The security costs are much higher in a capital case. It takes longer to select a jury. And then following a conviction, There will be additional security costs to house someone on a death row and to also defend the appeals, which some of which are automatic, others are not. But the appeals are critical to the integrity of the system to make sure that any mistakes that have occurred at trial are corrected before the ultimate injustice occurs. So these are all necessary costs. If you want to have a death penalty system, then you have to pay for it. And that's the cost that we're talking about.
And of course, that doesn't even mention the fact that some of these appeals go on for so long. We have an aging population on death row, and that's a completely different kettle of fish. But to get specific, there have been, with this tonight, 8 executions this year in the state of Texas. How much in tax dollars did the state of Texas have to spend to kill rather than imprison those men for life?
Well, these are just estimates, but we're talking about millions and millions of dollars. You can do the math, $1.3 million per execution times 8. Those are millions and millions of dollars that, again, if the voters of this state choose to use those vast resources on the death penalty, then they need to understand that's the cost. Otherwise, they can think about spending those dollars in other ways.
Well, Harris County, Texas, of course, where we are, where Execution Watch broadcasts, has earned the dubious distinction of being ground zero for the death penalty in the Western world. Since 1982, Harris County has been responsible for 133 executions. Mm-hmm. That's not only more than any other country, any county in Texas, it's also more than any state except Texas, of course. So how much have those 133 executions cost the taxpayers of Harris County?
More and more every year. We know this year that the average age of someone who is being executed is about 54 years old. That's the highest average age that we've seen in the modern death penalty era. The population, as you said, is getting older. Many of the people on death row are spending decades, many decades sometimes, on death row before they reach an execution date. So ideas like deterrence, the deterrent effect, are vastly mitigated by the fact that people are spending so very long on death row. And there are also a lot of victims' family members who are now saying, look, this is decades and decades of uncertainty and stress and anxiety, not bringing me any kind of closure. So many family members are now saying this is not something that I want to see happen, even to the murderer of one of my loved ones.
Well, how does somebody like Harris County and other high death penalty counties like Dallas pay for the high cost of capital cases? Does cost enter into the decision to prosecute a case? I really should ask Larry and Pat about this too. Does cost enter into the decision to prosecute a case as a capital crime and seek the death penalty?
No, not once, not ever.
Never?
I'm sorry, Robin, I didn't mean to cut you off. You go ahead.
No, you're fine.
When Carol Vance and Johnny Holmes were hitting their peak years, and with Chuck Rosenthal, the costs of these things were never something that they assessed, they worried about, or that they had to answer for. In fact, the drug forfeiture funds used to be used frequently to pay for experts. The Andrea Yates trial, the amount of money that they paid that quack was enormous, and it was straight out of slush funds that were run by the DA's office. That led to legislative reform, and they have less money available now, but they still have a great deal. And the simple truth is that Harris County just gave a death verdict last night on Darrell Wheatfall. They are starting up another, and it's going to keep going because they do not have to answer for this.
Well, are there any counties that do not seek the death penalty any longer because they simply can't afford it?
Yeah, I have seen evidence of that, and I certainly defer to Pat since he lives and works in Texas, and I do not. But what I have seen around the country from a national perspective is that many prosecutors are talking about incredibly high costs associated with prosecuting a capital case. And some counties have been bankrupted by those costs. So they are getting much more reluctant, much more reluctant about filing those capital charges and pursuing a death sentence in those cases. So I do think as time goes on and as people are really coming to grips with how much this costs, we are hopefully going to see other prosecutors thinking twice before they invest those kinds of taxpayer resources in a case.
To our listeners who cannot see what's going on our screens right now, Clinton Young is about to leave us. Clinton, do you have any last minute, anything else you'd like to say before you
No, I
take
stay
off?
now. We're done. We're done there, so I can stay.
You can stay? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Excellent. Getting back to our discussion, to justify the high cost of the death penalty, what sorts of arguments are made?
Let's see.
I'm sorry.
Clinton, you go.
Clinton?
No, I was just saying, like, I can't see her name. Miss Meyer, how you pronounce her name? Meyer?
That's right.
Mark.
Meyer. She said, she made the comment about, is there still counties seeking the death penalty based on, call, or not seeking it based on cost? And, there is, like, for example, in Harrison County, they said that they waited 21 years to reindict me because they couldn't afford it back then. And so you have a lot of them that just don't do it because the costs have risen so much because of mitigation. You know, court rulings requiring much more to be done in these cases as it should. And so prosecutors are come up with creative ways, like guys that get off death row, for example, get into a punishment phase. Instead of sending them back to death row, Harris County was doing this. They were saying, okay, you sign away all your back time. So if you've done 20 years, you know, back in the day, if you got a life sentence, you were parole eligible in like 20 years, 30 years, 35 years, or 40 years, depending on the era that you were sentenced in.
Clinton, quick.
So,
What is back time?
Right, well, that's what back time, whatever time you served in prison counts as your back time. Like, for example, I got 21 years done.
Right.
And so if, retrial goes through, I get found guilty, I get a life sentence, and I have 20 years done. I was parole eligible after 40 years. I'd only still have to do 19 years.
Well, is it
ma'am?
Is it considered a public safety matter to put to death a person convicted of a capital crime rather than imprisoning them for life?
Well, that's what they say, but the reality is there's tens of, like, thousands of people in prison for murder.
Right.
In Harris County alone, when Hurricane Harvey happened and then the political flip from Republican to Democrat, you had they wasn't doing trials because they got rid of all the prosecutors, brought in new prosecutors. Hurricane Harvey happened, all this other stuff. So, like, it basically shut down Harris County for a while. And Fox 26 or Channel 2, one of them had did a story that there was over 1,000 people charged with capital murder in Harris County alone that was awaiting trial. And that they could do trials for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it would still take like 2 years or something for them to complete all the trials. Now, think about that. There's 1,000 people that are eligible for the death penalty. They didn't send 1,000 people to death row. Those people committed capital murder. They're going to prison. And so if it's about a public safety thing, then every person that committed murder, every person that committed capital murder would go to death row. It's not. It's just like in situations like this right here. It's a revenge thing. You know, people were getting off death row in Harris County, and they were saying, hey, you sign away all your back time, then we'll give you a life sentence. Some guys were doing it. Some guys refused. And so, which basically means if they did 10, 15, 20 years, they done it for nothing. They done it for free, you know, because they didn't get no back time for it. They signed it away. And so, because they don't want to have to pay the cost for a death penalty trial. So the cost within itself is at times a deterrent, to wrap it up, is at times a deterrent in death penalty cases. My bad for interrupting you again, Pat.
Oh, that was well put, man.
Well
All right,
done.
go ahead.
Right. I have a question that was put forward today by our technical advisor, Otis McClay. And he basically asked the question, with pentobarbital being so questionable, why don't we have a fentanyl problem in the United States? Why are we using a drug that we know doesn't work versus a drug that is killing our people anyway?
Because the TDCJ folks have the power under our statutory system to elect a method of execution. They basically do this over lunch, and that is how it gets done. They have no protocols, no testing, no advice. They simply have a meeting, have some coffee, decide this will be the new way we kill people, and they send it out. And quite frankly, a veterinarian would be kinder and give more thought to what goes on. But this is where the legislature placed that authority, is with TDCJ. And they continue to basically take the easiest path. Whoever sells them a drug, no matter how old, no matter how useless, no matter how bad, is what they purchase and then use for these things.
You are listening to Execution Watch on KPFT 90.1 FM. I'm sorry for the signal disruption earlier. Thank you for staying with us. We are waiting to hear what is happening in Huntsville to see if the execution of David Renteria has happened.
It's going on now.
Our reporter Linda Snyder tells us, who is sitting in the cold, in the rain, outside of Huntsville, outside of the death house, has just told us that the execution is going on now. Is that correct, Linda?
Yes, that's correct.
The van has come?
News media has already gone in.
All right. So we have our signal as close as we possibly can. We do not cross the road anymore. There was a fire in this 1848 building. It was built in 1848, I think. It's a very old, it's the last Civil War prison, to give you a little more perspective on this. So, how many people are out there with you, Linda?
There's only about 7 or 8 people. It's really small tonight.
Yeah, not very many tonight. It sounds like Gloria has put down the bullhorn as well.
Yes.
Well, please let us know if you see any other movement or anything else comes up. We would appreciate it.
Marlo and Robin and Clinton and Larry, thank you for letting me appear. I'm afraid I'm about to lose signal here because of a storm.
Right.
But I apologize for my absence, but thank you for letting me come on.
Thank you. As always. Thank you so much, Pat.
Glad to have you.
Always glad to have you. And really very fortunate to have you, Larry, and you, Robin, and Clinton, because this is a good, well-balanced group. Linda, tell us how the movement is going. I mean, it feels like here in Texas that there is no movement to end the death penalty. But what are you seeing in our nation's capital? You're in Washington, D.C., is that correct?
Sorry, was that question?
Robin?
Yeah, yes, I'm in Washington, D.C. So I'm sorry, I thought you said Linda, but if the
my
question's
apologies.
for me,
It's for
no
you,
problem.
Robin.
She did say Linda.
Sorry.
So you're asking what we're seeing in terms of from a national perspective about use of the death penalty?
Correct.
Well, I think there the news is much better than it is tonight. We continue to see a dramatic decline in use of the death penalty. We will continue. This will be the 9th straight year with fewer than 50 death sentences and very few new death sentences and executions. think I mangled that statement, but the idea is that this is the 9th straight year that we have continued on a trend away from the use of the death penalty. So the news, I think, is very, very good in that regard. This year, only 5 states in the country conducted executions, and 7 states have passed or enacted new death sentences for people. So this is the small number of states in the country that are using death penalty. The rest of the country is either abolished it or has moratorium on executions in place. So the majority of the United States has now said, no, thank you. We're not interested in using the death penalty. And that's very good news for everyone.
Larry?
Well, clearly we know that this is a societal issue. And my mentor, Jim Skelton, would always mention the fact that there's so many states that don't have the death penalty. And even in Texas, there's so many counties, many of whom have never imposed the death penalty. Because of the cost. Now, if you've got a larger county, which means you've got more resources, then the likelihood of pursuing the death penalty is going to be greater. And it's also so much prosecutorial discretion is exercised in deciding, are we going to even seek the death penalty or not?
Right.
It sometimes just makes no sense. Which ones they seek the death penalty on and which ones they don't. But I am favorably inclined, but I really favor the trend that's going on right now. There is getting less and less. Now, every once in a while there's a spike, okay? But even in Texas, even in Harris County, the trend still seems to be fewer and fewer. Now, at some point, will this society decide we're going to stop using the death penalty for whatever reason? It's not always equally applied, but there is still, as Clinton mentioned earlier, the issue of vengeance is still so strong in certain people's attitude, saying, you killed somebody, you killed my whatever, I'm going to kill you. You took a life. You're going to get a life taken. Now, there are some difficult cases that have come along that make us wonder, is it necessary or not? I mean, the Texas 7, okay, didn't do any good for the whole movement away from the death penalty. Say, what are you going to do when you put somebody in prison and they still kill? Well, maybe that's the only way you should be able to use it. I don't know. But I am still favorably impressed with the trend that are going on right now. I think that the day will come, might not be soon, when we will totally abolish the death penalty. But it's not going to happen without a lot of activism. And I submit that this show does a part in getting the trend to move the right way.
Well, I think the more we learn about the death penalty, the more we learn about how much it costs and how it is a failed public policy in so many places, and the unfairness and the mistakes that are made in so many cases. The more people learn about that, I think the less in favor of the death penalty they will be.
Clinton?
Yeah, they it ain't anything about like. And at the annual anti-death penalty march, I talked about the various counties, and what makes it even all the more arbitrary is like in Travis County right now, if somebody killed 3 people in Travis County, hopefully nobody does, but if such a tragedy happens, due to the politics of Travis County District Attorney, he's not seeking the death penalty in any case. He's not publicly said that. Okay. But a person could kill one person in Tarrant County and meeting the criteria for seeking the death penalty or for having the death penalty sought on them. But because of the politics of Tarrant County, he's going to go to death row. Mm-hmm. And so that within itself, I mean, it makes it all the more arbitrary because it's like, it's not equal justice. I mean, you're basically at the whim of the political winds of the area that you just happen to commit a crime in. You know, and so not only is there an economic factor, but now more than ever in the state of Texas is the political factor. Because in the past, Travis County has sent people to death row. Not as often as other large cities in Texas, but they still done it. But now they're not going to.
Mm-hmm.
And Harris County has changed drastically because of the politics have shifted. Dallas County, etc. And now what's happening is a lot of these small counties, what they're doing is they can't afford it. So they're turning the cases over to the Attorney General's office. All right. There's a capital murder case in Gregg County in Longview, Texas right now. They turned it, Gregg County recused themselves from the case, turned it over to the AG's office, the AG seeking the death penalty. A case out of Panola County, same thing happened, AG seeking death. Down near Waco, on and on and on. So these small counties that can't afford it are coming up with creative reasons to say, oh, we got to get off the case for this, that, or the third, and then give it over to the AG's office, and it don't matter. They're seeking death against everybody.
Clinton,
Every case they get.
do you
death
follow all of the cases that are capital punishment now that you're out?
Well, no, I mean, I keep up with the news naturally, right? I keep up
Right.
with what's going on because, I mean, I still got a lot of friends down there that are wrongfully convicted. You know, I got to mention one of them because Larry mentioned Texas 7, but like Randy Halpern, he's down there. He's innocent. He didn't kill
Right.
nobody, and didn't even have a gun. He's on death row. It don't make no sense. Anthony Medina, on and on and on. Ricky Cummings, and so yeah, I do keep up with it, right? Because it affects people that I care about that are still down there naturally, and plus, my own personal interest in activism,
Right.
and reforming the system. But it's just, it seemed like when I spoke to the legislator, the House of Representatives, you know, you have people like Leach and several others, and I had politicians come up to me afterwards, after I spoke, came up to me and talked to me, and one of them, he's from a really conservative area, and I was shocked that he came up and spoke to me. And but it's like, man, a lot of them just don't have the courage because when it comes to primary elections, radicals rule the day.
Right.
I mean, it's just how it is. You know, the most radical of the party controls the primaries. And so a lot of these politicians, they just feel like the only way they can continue their political career is staying silent on what they consider a controversial matter. And me personally, I don't see why anybody would sit silent when it comes to the government taking a citizen's life, especially a lack of due process. I mean, even with David's case here, you know, Larry read in the legal work that it came out that this witness came forward. Okay. That should be explored. You know, that unanswered question should not still exist. And that's just like I said, it's just, you know, they say it gets worse before it gets better. Well, I don't.
Let's just hope it gets better, eh?
Yeah, it's declined a lot, but it's like
Right.
now the opinions, and I think that some of the elite class of Texas that's involved in our judicial class and political system are so obsessed with death, and they recognize that times are changing, their systems are crumbling, and so it's like they're coming up with more and more insane legal opinions and court rulings that justify and allow them to kill more people. And it's like they look at it, they got a handful of people still on death row, and they're like, we got to get rid of all of them before the system's overturned. You know,
Well, this
before,
is a
before the death penalty
conversation.
ends.
This is a conversation that we need to continue, but unfortunately, we are out of time tonight. So, thank you for that. We have not heard the signal. It has not come back. We do not know the status, but we do know that the execution has begun for David Renteria. So thanks, everyone. That brings us to a close this edition of Execution Watch for Thursday, November 16th, 2023. Our next scheduled broadcast date is Wednesday, February the 28th, 2024, as Texas prepares to send Ivan Cantu into the death chamber in Huntsville, Texas. And if it does, Execution Watch will cover the state-sanctioned killing beginning at 6 p.m. Central Time with our live news coverage. A very special thanks to all of the Execution Watch crew: Larry Douglas, Pat McCann, Linda Snyder, Clinton Young, video director Mark Pirtle, Otis McClay, Howard Reynolds, social media Sarah, to Elise, to our executive producer Elizabeth Ann Stein. And just a reminder that your support is critical to keeping this broadcast on the air. Coming up next, if you're listening on KPFT, stay tuned for People of Earth with Jacqueline Baptiste. This has been Execution Now. Watch. I'm Marlo Blue. Good night.
State of Texas, leave Willie alone. The government killed the most. Got a problem, death row. Ever wonder where money goes? People of Texas, don't you know? Some accused are innocent. Some get good lawyers, most don't. State of Texas, killing machine. Don't you know they're killing people? 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 We're not giving up. One's too many. Will 1,000 be enough? One life. We're not giving up. One's too many in 1,000. State of Texas, leave Willie alone. The government.
Gary Green is a prisoner in Texas. If the state has its way, he'll be dead within the hour. This is Execution Watch. Huntsville, Texas, death penalty capital of the Western world, where prison staff is preparing to put Green to death by injecting him with a deliberate drug overdose. During the next hour, KPFT's Execution Watch will air live coverage of the killing in Texas, the state that has carried out a third of U.S. executions. Execution Watch host Marlo Blue, criminal defense attorneys Larry Douglas and Pat McCann, Huntsville report outside the death house, Linda Huhan, special guest, former death row inmate Clinton Young, and a very special guest tonight, Gary Green himself, in an unedited death row interview he did recently with host Marlo Blue. The Execution Watch for Gary Green begins.
This is the first of two scheduled executions this week by the state of Texas. Tonight, Gary Green, and on Thursday, March the 9th, Arthur Brown. To our listeners around the world, thank you for joining us on this Tuesday, March the 7th edition of Execution Watch. I'm Marlo Blue. If you're tuning in for Coming to America on KPFT Houston, they will be back next week in their 6 o'clock time slot. The show brings you live news coverage as the state of Texas plans to execute 51-year-old Gary Green, convicted in the 2009 double homicide in Dallas, Texas. I interviewed Mr. Green in Livingston at the Polanski unit on February the 22nd. If the execution proceeds, and only if it proceeds, we will air that final interview in its entirety and unedited. You know, normally we go straight to our reporter, Linda Snyder, in Huntsville, but tonight we're going to first go and talk with our chief legal analyst, Mr. Larry Douglas. So talk about this, please, Larry.
As you know, Marlo, this is a horrible case, as almost all death penalty cases are. Gary Green, comes out of Dallas, Texas. And Gary Green grew up in Dallas, went to high school there in Dallas. Coming out of high school, he got into a little bit of trouble. He had a drug case that he did probation for, and he had a robbery case that he was sentenced to 20 years on. Gets out of prison, and he gets into a relationship with a young lady, Lavetta Armstead. Now, during his life, Mr. Green had some major mental health issues. He was diagnosed with major depressive disorder. He was psychotic, schizophrenia, bipolar, and his brother said, you know, there was always something a little bit wrong with Gary. He and Lavetta Armstead had only been married for a few months, and she decided that she had 3 children, a daughter and 2 older sons. She decided that the relationship was not working out. So she'd put him out. And then she let him come back in. And when he came back in, it still didn't work out. So they'd been married for a short amount of time. Now the reporters suggest whether it was a divorce or an annulment, but she told Gary one day that, you know, this is just not working out. Probably never should let you come back in, but it's time for you to go. We need to part ways. I love you, but we can't, it's just not working. She wrote him 2 notes, same day. He writes her a note back saying that he's gonna kill 5 people. The last is gonna be himself. Herself, her daughter, her 2 sons, and then himself. And then he, according to he gave a lengthy videotape confession. According to his confession, this little girl was 6 years old. He put tape around her mouth, tied her up, and then went to the bedroom and killed her mother. Lavetta didn't go down without a struggle. They fought. She took the cover off the tank on the toilet, tried to hit him with that. He started stabbing her. Stabbed her, according to his confession, 30 times. She was able to stab him a couple of times toward the back, but just superficial wounds. But she died. He said, I stabbed her about 30 times, not all at once. She dies, then he takes the little girl and drowns her in the tub. After he does that, he takes a shower himself and then goes to church and picks up the 2 little boys, preparing to kill them. And he gets back to the house and stabs the younger boy. The older boy just stricken with fear, can't say anything. The younger boy talks his way out of it, said, you know, we love each other, and I'm just too young to die. So what we could do is we'll never tell anybody. So you need to let us go. He relents and says, I think I'll do that. But you guys better not tell anybody until. And then he shows them their mother and little sister's bodies, according to him. And they say they just broke down crying. Then he told them to go get his medicine, his pills. And he took 30 tablets of Tylenol and Benadryl. And he says, don't call the police until I'm gone. So he left, went home, and then seemed to recover because they found him in one of his friend's houses. They took him to the hospital. And so he had a trial, but the lengthy confession that he gave, because the details of what all happened came from him, from his videotaped confession. The trial was one, as we discussed earlier, Marlo. This is the kind of case that it fits the definition of a death penalty case. The prosecutor has the discretion as to whether to seek it, though, and with the amount of outrage clearly from the family, they were looking for retribution, and they were able to get it. At trial, the tactic seemed to be to use the fact that he had mental health issues to allow him to escape the death penalty. The guilt as a murder, capital murder, was almost foregone conclusion, but then future danger and mitigation were the issues. And in terms of mitigation, his lawyers developed had an expert, Dr. Gilbert Martinez. And Dr. Martinez, the testimony suggested that he was mentally impaired, mentally disabled. The problem is that he had an IQ from the doctor. The doctor gave a battery of exams, and his IQ was as low as 78. But he'd been to prison before, and during prison his IQ was shown to be a 105. So the evidence on future danger, they brought in two of his girlfriends who he had when they tried to break up with him. He had choked them out. And on mitigation, the evidence was deemed not by the jury not to be sufficient in terms of his intellectual disability.
We don't have Skype yet. Keep going.
Okay.
Now, I understand that you interviewed him. How was that, Marlo, when you went up to? I've interviewed a few, but it always leaves me with reading the materials is one thing, but going in and visiting with a person that the state is preparing to die leaves a deep impression on a person. How was it for you?
I am extremely disturbed by the entire incident. The interview itself was talking to, I don't want to give anything away, but I found talking to Mr. Green incredibly humanizing. And we give you statistics, we give you facts, we tell people about things and the death that is coming, but to sit across from somebody and the glasses in there and feeling a connection with another human being is something that is, I don't know how people do this on a regular basis. I really don't. And I won't lie to you, it's been incredibly disturbing for me. Pat McCann, you're here. Thank you for joining us tonight. And as we discuss this trial, what do you see in it? What are you bringing up?
You know, this is a marriage that dissolved, and it dissolved with one of the partners who was very mentally ill. He had been hospitalized about a month before this incident. He attempted suicide the night of the incident. He turned himself in with family to the police station. It is almost textbook in the sense of if the diagnosis is correct that he had schizoid affective disorder, that means you have the worst of both bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. So you not only have delusions, but you also have the manic aspects and depressive aspects of bipolar. As a layperson, I've grappled with that with a few clients. It is enormously difficult to get them to focus in on what's actually in front of them. And I think one of the tragedies of this is that we don't have a good education or understanding for most people, particularly jurors, about the effects of mental illness on this. And this was obviously someone who had a breakdown. It is tragic, and no one says that this makes things okay, but to execute him for what is obviously a psychotic break seems like a very tough step to take forward. And I'm certain this fellow, as I understand it, is fairly huge. I'm well over 6 feet tall, well over 300 pounds. So a physically frightening person is obviously someone that has admitted to killing a child, is obviously someone that people are going to have very little sympathy for. But there seems to be strong evidence that if he is not actually what we would call mentally retarded, he's close, and he has mental illness. It's a tragic combination and a difficult one to overcome.
Right now, let's go join our reporter outside of the death house in Huntsville, Linda Snyder. Hello, Linda. Any news?
Hi, how are you doing? Can you hear us?
Yes, we certainly can. And I see that you have another one of our new panel members. You have Meryl Pontier there with you.
Yes.
Thank you for joining. Is this your first execution to actually be protesting in person, Meryl?
Yeah, it is. This is the first time I'm actually here. And I was at Polinsky today visiting clients, and I saw Gary Green having his last visit before they took him away at noon today to be transported to the Huntsville unit.
Linda?
Yes.
Do you have any questions for Meryl?
No, we're waiting for them to cross. They haven't crossed yet.
Right. Meryl, how does it look in person to you? What are you seeing that is different from what you expected?
Well, apparently I was just on the wrong side. We walked over here, me and my assistant, and there's people here now who are in favor of executions. And so they're protesting, or I guess supporting these executions on the other side of the unit. So I was actually on the wrong side at first. But, I guess the good thing is I talked to those people for a while, and they explained to me why they're in favor of executions, and I explained to them why I'm not. And I gave the example of Clinton's case and how he's innocent and spent 20 years on death row. And they actually said they were going to watch his documentary. So, I think that was good. We respectfully agreed to disagree. But other than that, it's, for me, it's a good reminder for why I do this work. It's kind of a little bit overwhelming to stand here and, knowing that someone's about to die on the inside of this unit. We're standing in the road.
Linda, do we know who is actually standing witness for Gary Green?
His brother and his cousin.
His brother and his cousin. I know his mother is still alive, so is she?
He asked his mother not to come because she's taking this very hard, and he didn't want to see her today. She came Saturday night to visit him.
So she did see him again.
Yes, she did.
And
But she cries all the time, and that was upsetting to Gary. So he asked her not to come to this.
all right. So who is out there today? I believe I see Maureen Monk there. I see the Rev. Are there many people who are protesting the death penalty?
Oh, there's a lot of people out here protesting, yes.
On both sides, eh?
Yeah, you see everybody, there's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. Meryl, the people that you talked to, were they specifically protesting Gary Green's execution, or were they just for execution in general?
They explained to me that they are supporting these executions in general, and that like 3 executions ago, they realized that people were out here protesting executions, and so they felt like they needed to kind of show the other side, and they felt like they needed to protest, I guess, us or support executions. So their intention is to just stand here every time there's an execution to show support, because they said there's also people on the other side protesting, so it kind of equals it out, I guess, is how I understood it.
Right, right. That's very interesting. Well, thank you for letting them know about Clinton's documentary. Maybe that'll give them some other information that they never had before.
I think so. I think it did. Yeah, they were interested. And like I said, we talked for about 15 minutes. And
Right.
I told them I never try to convince people to be against the death penalty.
Right.
But I think, educating people is important. And so they explained to me why they're in favor. And so I explained why I'm against it. And innocence is a big reason. And they were actually very receptive to that argument. And they said they were going to watch the documentary. So
There you go. All victories are good, in this case.
exactly.
Linda, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just watching to see when they cross, but they have not crossed yet.
Okay. Just let us know, please.
Okay, all right, we will.
Thank you so much. And we're going to go back into this discussion with Pat and with Larry, and let's bring Clinton in too, if we may. Clinton Young is also a new member of our panel. Clinton, he's one of our new reporter, as a matter of fact. He has done over 18 years on Texas's death row. So he has a very unique unique perspective that he can tell us. Clinton, can you hear us as well?
Yeah, if I start coughing and stuff, right now I got a very unique sinus infection. So.
We do not like unique sinus